tonight.
They give the ball to Charbonnet. He dodges a guy at the 1 and jumps into the end zone. Touchdown, Michigan.
Number 18, the Michigan Wolverines.
Here's where we have the Wolverines, and here to talk to us about Michigan, Angelique Shangelis from the Detroit News. Great to have you with us as well. Before we dive into the team, Michigan State's obviously having issues fighting the virus, Angelique, with shutting down practices again. How are the Wolverines doing? What have you been able to learn? And I know sometimes it's hard to get a lot of information out of that camp, but how are they doing with all this?
They've actually been doing pretty well, and Michigan has been semi-transparent with COVID numbers. They've been releasing numbers, general numbers for all the sports, and I just found out last night there are 18 teams on campus, so, not just football, and they paused 4 of them last night, ice hockey, field hockey, and swimming and diving and volleyball, but my understanding is the football team itself has actually tested pretty well, and the numbers have been low across the board, but I think obviously that those will increase this week with these 4 teams pausing. But from my understanding, I've talked to a couple players. They're wearing masks during all their workouts. They get yelled at if they come within 6 feet of each other. So, and that's been since voluntary workouts. So they've been pretty diligent. Even David Ojabo, the kid, the defensive lineman who was in Scotland and just returned, he's in a 2-week quarantine. And I talked to him the other night and said, well, are you seeing anybody? He said they just come by and they kind of wave to him from afar. And he said that they are taking this lockdown seriously. So not just him, but the rest of them. So, we'll see how this goes. It's going to be harder, I think, once more people get on campus. And so it goes with parties and everything. But so far, so good for the Michigan football program.
All right, very good. Let's jump into the nuts and bolts of this team. Shea Patterson exhausted his eligibility last year after the bowl game against Alabama. Give me an update. What's his quarterback race look like?
Boy, I really wish they had had a spring because I thought that was going to be a really, really fun competition to watch evolve between Dylan McCaffrey and Joe Milton. And everybody's really been salivating, waiting for that one. And hopefully there's a season, hopefully there's a preseason camp, and we'll be able to sink our teeth into that one. But look, Dylan McCaffrey's been the backup. He's had more experience. Joe Milton's got this cannon of an arm. He's a tremendous athlete. Dylan McCaffrey's got quickness. He's quicker than Joe Milton, but Joe Milton's got tremendous upside. So I think a lot of people think it's a toss-up. I think it favors Dylan McCaffrey at this point. I mean, he was from his quarantine, his lockdown was at home in Colorado with his brother Christian McCaffrey and his father and his brother, and they worked out every day. So that's pretty good talent to be around on a constant basis. And Joe Milton was in Florida and then returned to the Detroit area and worked with former Michigan quarterback Devin Gardner. So they've both been working hard, and maybe it's too close to call, but right now I'd give the edge to Dylan McCaffrey.
The other thing on that offense that doesn't get nearly as much attention as the quarterbacks is all the different guys that got to put along that offensive line. How do you see that position stacking up? Because they had 4 starters off that line that have graduated.
4 starters are gone in the NFL, and I'd agree with you. I actually think that's a bigger storyline going into camp than the quarterbacks because I think they'll be okay with either of those guys. But they've got to replace 4 guys, and they've got Jalen Mayfield returning, and already a lot of accolades for him and his potential for going pro after this season. But, I mean, they've got to replace Cesar Ruiz, the center, who was really, I thought one more year for him. Even though he was a first-round draft pick, I thought he could really, really take that next step up. But, they've got a lot of holes there, and they feel like Josh Gaddis, their offensive coordinator, said they don't feel like they're that behind the ball because they've got guys. Andrew Stuber had started. He tore his knee before the season. He was neck and neck with Mayfield. And they've got Ryan Hayes, who's had some starts as well. So they don't feel like they're starting completely from scratch. But Ed Warner's definitely got a lot of work to do building that offensive line.
Again, visiting with Angelique Shangelis from the Detroit News. We're talking about Michigan. We have them at number 18 in our preseason top 25. Let's go to defense, maybe more settled there, right? I mean, there's a lot of names back that have played a lot of football for Big Blue on that side of the ball.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that they feel really good about it. Don Brown feels very good about what he has coming back. I mean, you look at Dax Hill in the secondary and Ambry Thomas. They really like those guys. And it really, I think this team, the leadership of this overall team is coming from that defensive side. You've got Aiden Hutchinson and Carlo Kemp back on the defensive line, Kwity Paye, who's, of course, getting a lot of preseason accolades as well. And they've got some pretty good linebackers coming back. So I think that they feel overall good about it. It's just they still lack some depth in that interior of the defensive line, and that's where they need to shore things up. But generally speaking, I think that even with two new coaches, too, working with these guys, I think they feel really good about where this defense is going.
I still don't know how Ohio State put 56 on that group. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think Don Brown is wondering that, too.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. I've had a couple conversations with guys on the defense and more recently with Aiden Hutchinson, and they've really spent a lot of the offseason, he said, since the start of the year, focusing on the mental approach to Ohio State because they don't feel like the talent gap is huge, so they believe it must be a mental block. And I've covered this team for a long time. I was there when Michigan had the edge over Ohio State 10-2-1, and the Michigan players were saying they've got a mental block with us. And I think that's what's true now. And Aiden actually asked him that, and he said he thought that was true, that guys were going into this game last year feeling tight, not believing in it. And they've worked with a Navy SEAL in the offseason trying to get their mental approach better to believe that they can go in and win that game.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's been enough years now where it's got to be partly mental because there's not that big a gap talent-wise between those two programs. All right, selfishly, you had to be disappointed with the loss of the Washington game. I was certainly looking forward to that one. That was a great matchup in my eyes for college football in week one. That has to be disappointing. I know we all understand it, but that was going to be a cool matchup, wasn't it?
It really was, and I was there for the last one. That was a long time ago, and it really pained me when I had to delete my hotel reservation. But look, you're right. We all understand why the changes were made, and I actually went back and looked. The Lexington Herald-Leader had polled a bunch of us in April and said, what do you think is going to happen this season? And I said, I think it'll be non-conference games gone. It'll just be conference games starting in mid-October. And, fingers crossed that that's still something that could happen. But I think I always suspected that the non-conference games would go away, but that would have been a really interesting game. And it would have been kind of wild because Fox wants to make a lot of these Pac-12 games noon starts on the East Coast. So they were looking at that as one of those 9 a.m. kickoffs Pacific time. So that would have been kind of interesting to cover a 9 a.m. football game, for me at least, not for the I don't think anybody else would have found it that interesting. But it's a tough place to play, and obviously Washington has some changes there too. But it's been tough for Michigan to go to the West Coast and play well. So, unfortunately, you're right. We won't see that. We won't see Ohio State playing out west either. So, these are all the dominoes that have fallen because of this pandemic.
We're all shooting in the dark because we don't know the schedule. What's your gut say? Is it going to be the same 9, add one new one? What do you think they're going to do?
See, I think that they're going to. I think they're going to shuffle it a little bit, and I think that they'll front load it with the division games. So, all the East Division games will be played early so they can have a championship game, so they can determine the champions of both divisions. And if things are going well, then you play the rest of those games if you can. And if you can't, then you've got your championship game set, and you can play that. And I think ultimately make that television money that these teams desperately need to support all of their athletic department programs. But I do wonder about that. I've really tossed and turned on that because I think that this is maybe a good chance for them to reassess the schedule and just balance it a little differently going forward for this season, over 10 games.
All right, well, we'll look forward to seeing what happens. Again, we appreciate you coming on as you do every time. And we've got Michigan at number 18, and hopefully we're talking about some real football when you come back the next time.
I sure hope so. Thanks for having me on, though.
Thank you. Angelique Shingalis from the Detroit News joined us on our Sports Nightly Hotline, brought to you by the Woodhouse Auto Family, bringing you more choices in brands, locations, and service. Experience the difference. Purchase with confidence. This is Woodhouse.